So to preface this video, I want to state that I think there are some perfectly valid reasons for being a vegetarian, and I'm going to go through those right now. Number 1, being a vegetarian for health reasons. If you can't digest meat, or it makes you feel sick to eat it, then it's perfectly reasonable not to. Number 2, you just don't like the taste of it. Number 3, you don't like how the big meat corporations handle their business. You find their attitudes towards the environment to be unethical, and you find that their practices are unsanitary. And as a protest, you refuse to eat meat. But it should be noted that this is a protest not against eating meat, but against meat practices. And number 4, you're emotionally bothered by it, but you understand that that is a subjective view, and you don't make any objective statements about it. I'm sure there's some that I missed, but the only one I'm objecting to and will be arguing against is the statement that eating meat is always unethical, and I'll be providing my reasoning as to why I think so. Everyone, whether they're consciously aware of it or not, divides the food they eat into things they believe are ethical to eat and unethical to eat. And to prove that point, I'll write some things in each category that I think we can all agree on. So on this side I'll put vegetables, fruit, and on the other side I'll put other people. An omnivore, a vegetarian, and a vegan will disagree about what food items, like meat, fish, and eggs, will appear on which side of the dividing line. But what almost nobody does is try to express in words what exactly this dividing line represents. So to help put into words what that dividing line consists of, I'm going to employ my hypothetical and completely edible robot, Robotron. I'm going to commutatively give Robotron qualities along this line, and you can decide when it's unethical to eat Robotron. Before we go any further, I want to address the possible counter-argument that my robot doesn't count because it doesn't fall under the category of being biologically alive. But as we see on the dividing line, the things that are on there are all biologically alive. Vegetables and fruit are biologically alive, and so are other people. So there must be something else other than that that actually constitutes as the dividing line. You could say that only animals or creatures count, but this is as poor an argument as people advocating that eating meat is ethical on the basis that only humans count. A label does not give automatic moral entitlement, and this argument is known as special pleading. And I hope we can move past such an argument and move on to more important things. The reason I chose a robot for this demonstration is because I think it's easy to conceptualize a robot that doesn't actually have any qualities yet. Whereas if I made a hypothetical animal with no qualities, it's hard to separate animal from things like nervous systems or emotions or the other qualities that make up pretty much every other animal we can think of. If I told you to picture that, it would be very hard to visualize, but if I asked you to start with a metal box on wheels that has no other qualities, that would be very easy for your mind to visualize. I hope that addresses any concerns of using Robotron as an analogy. As long as we understand that Robotron is edible, we should be able to apply the same standards of ethics when determining whether it is okay to eat him or not. Okay, so let's start giving Robotron some qualities. First, sensors. So we're going to imagine Robotron now has millions of sensors all over his exterior. And what they do is they record changes in his physical structure, such as damage, and changes in temperature, and they record that as information. So the next quality will be emotions. So for all purposes, Robotron's emotions serve exactly like humans do. He can feel fear, anger, happiness, and sadness, and they correspond directly with his sensors. If his sensory input tells him that he's being damaged, Robotron will now feel unhappy. So next up is survival. So for this quality, we're also going to give Robotron working cameras for eyes, audio devices so he can hear, and motor functions so that his wheels will work. He's going to use these to try to get away from things that his sensors and his emotions tell him that are negative. Okay, so next. Robotron now looks exactly like a cute animal. You can choose which cute animal for yourself or make one up. Robotron now emits a loud, painful squeal whenever his sensors tell him that he has been damaged. Robotron now has the ability to secrete tears from his cameras whenever his emotions tell him he is unhappy. So the next quality will be behavior changes. This is a survival mechanism that gives Robotron at least a basic memory so that he won't repeat behaviors that could cause him harm, such as going into a dangerous area. The last quality I'm going to give Robotron is self-awareness. Self-awareness is a very complex study, but I'm going to at least read the basic description from Wikipedia so we have some understanding of what I mean by it. Self-awareness describes the condition of being aware that one exists as an individual being. Self-awareness gives one the option to choose thoughts rather than simply entertaining the thoughts triggered by current outside stimuli. Self-awareness theory states that when we focus our attention on ourselves, we evaluate and compare our current behavior to our internal standards and values. We become self-conscious as objective evaluators of ourselves. So hopefully, as I was giving Robotron qualities, you chose one that you would think adequately suits as a dividing line. I'm going to categorize the various qualities into different arguments, and then I'll be addressing them. So I've put sensors and emotions under an argument of sentience. I've put survival and behavior changes under an argument from behavior. I put looking cute, squealing, and secreting tears under an argument of empathy, and I put self-awareness under a category of itself, an argument from self-awareness. So I want to deal with empathy first, because I think it's the easiest of the arguments to address. Empathy is the ability to sense and share the feelings of other creatures, such as pain and misery, and will cause us to take steps to reduce said feelings. So what's wrong with using empathy as a moral guideline when trying to determine whether something is ethical or not? Well, the problem is that empathy is often misdirected. I'm going to give some examples that show how. Picture the following scenario. You're home alone, it's late at night, and it's raining outside. A knock comes on your door, and you open it up. There is a man with no jacket, freezing in the shivering cold. He says he wants to use your phone and that his car is broken down. Your feelings of empathy are going to make you feel the misery that he does, and you can choose based on that to let him in and use your phone. But what if he attacks you, or kills you, or steals your things? Your empathy has no way of discerning whether or not what he is saying is true, and that is one issue that empathy has. It has no way of discerning the true or falseness of any claim. Another failing of empathy is how the feeling can be brought up with things that are not even self-aware, let alone sentient. A really good example of this is the IKEA lamp commercial. Another example would be how we feel towards fictional characters from books, movies, and games. Despite these things not even existing, we can still have a sense of empathy towards them. So how can we use that as a moral guideline when determining whether something is ethical or not? We can't. Relating that back to Robotron, what if our hypothetical robot only had the qualities listed under empathy and no others? That would mean that the robot doesn't feel pain, it doesn't feel any sadness, and it is not self-aware, although it would appear as though it had all those qualities. The real problem is that the appearance of qualities is not more important than the qualities themselves, and that's why empathy is a bad moral guideline. Now to address the argument from behavior. My main issue with an argument from behavior is that if something behaves as though it wants to survive, it does not necessarily mean that it wants to or even cares to survive. A good example of this is the Mimosa pudica, or sensitive plant. This plant, when touched, folds inwards and looks droopy, as though to appear inedible to herbivores. This behavior maximizes its survivability. But this plant has no nervous system, nor a brain, so there's no reason to think that it has any sentient or conscious experience. It merely does these things. If we gave Robotron multiple weapons and defenses to increase its survivability, and the memory to adapt to situations and figure out what the best strategy is for them, but we took all the other qualities away, such as emotion and self-awareness, it would speak absolutely nothing for what Robotron actually wants. And what is the point of forcing an ethic on something that does not actually care whether it survives or not? I don't really think this is a fruitful thing to do, so we probably shouldn't. So where I feel the real discussion lies is determining whether sentience or self-awareness should serve as the dividing line when deciding if something is ethical to eat or not. In part 2 of this video, I'm going to give my reasonings as why I think self-awareness should serve as that dividing line.